Imagine this. You're holding a key in your hand. It's small, cold, metallic. It hums softly as if alive. This key doesn't unlock a door. It unlocks a moment, a passage to another time. Yes, you found it. A time machine. You were never meant to find it. It was buried, forgotten, hidden by those who feared what it could do. But curiosity is loud and persistent. So here you are. You step inside. A seat awaits you. The levers are unfamiliar, but your hands know what to do. As if you've done this before. You pull the lever, and time begins to reverse. People walk backward. Raindrops rise back into the sky. Events unhappen. You move through time, not forward, but back. Back through decades. Back through history. Back to a small, quiet town. You open the hatch and step out. And there he is, a young man, barely 20, taller than you imagined, smiling, carefree. He doesn't know he'll be your grandfather, because he hasn't met your grandmother yet, hasn't had your parent, hasn't created you. You watch him from a distance. You feel something strange, not fear, not regret, but power. Now imagine, you raise your hand, and in it is a gun. You have a choice. One moment, one decision, and you could erase your entire existence. But here's the twist. If you succeed in killing your grandfather, then you're never born. And if you're never born, who pulled the trigger? This is the grandfather paradox. One of the strangest puzzles in the entire landscape of thought. It's a story told in countless science fiction tales, from H.G. Wells to Doctor Who, from Back to the Future to The Terminator. But at its heart, it's not about time machines. It's about cause and effect. It's about whether the past can ever truly be changed. Let's play with the idea a little more. What if you didn't kill him? What if you simply warned him? Told him not to walk down a certain street. Told him to take a different job. Told him to avoid a woman with blue eyes and a laugh like summer. That small warning changes everything. He never meets your grandmother, which means, again, you were never born. And if you're never born, you never traveled back in time. You never warned him. So he does meet your grandmother. And you are born. And you do go back. Again and again, like a song stuck on repeat. This is what philosophers call a causal loop. A cycle where cause and effect chase each other in circles. Time becomes a mirror, and everything reflects everything else. But some minds believe the universe wouldn't allow such contradictions. Enter the Novikov self-consistency principle. This idea says, sure, you can travel through time, but only in a way that's consistent with the timeline you came from. You can't stop your grandfather, because you already didn't. Maybe the gun jams. Maybe you trip. Maybe you discover he's not your grandfather at all. The universe, under Novikov's law, is a closed story. You can turn the pages, but you can't rewrite them. Others believe in the many worlds interpretation. In that theory, the moment you pull the trigger, the timeline splits. One world where your grandfather dies, another where he lives. One where you vanish, another where you go on existing. Every choice spawns new worlds, an infinite multiverse. You could live, die, be born, never exist, all at the same time. Like echoes through parallel dimensions. It sounds fantastic, and terrifying, and beautiful. Let's leave the machine for a moment. Step out of the time vortex. Because paradoxes don't just belong to time travel. Some of them exist in language, in the very way we think. Here's one. This sentence is false. 6 simple words. But they might as well be a black hole. Because if it's true, then what it says must be the case. But it says it's false. So it must be false. But if it's false, then it's not telling the truth. Which means it's true. Which means it's false. And true. And false. Welcome to the liar's paradox. It sounds playful, doesn't it? Like a riddle on a birthday card. But don't be fooled. It's a razor blade wrapped in ribbon. The liar's paradox dates back over 2,000 years. The Greek philosopher Euclid posed it first. But through the centuries, it's haunted thinkers. Mathematicians, logicians, linguists, even computer scientists. Let me show you something. Write this on a piece of paper. The sentence on the other side of this paper is true. Then flip it. And write, the sentence on the other side of this paper is false. Now read one, then the other, then back again. You've just built a paradox machine with a pencil. Why does this matter? Because truth itself depends on logic, and paradoxes break logic. They tear tiny holes in the fabric of thought, and through those holes, we glimpse mystery. In the 1930s, a mathematician named Kurt Gödel used something like the liar's paradox to prove something that shook the foundations of mathematics. He showed that in any logical system, complex enough to do arithmetic, there are statements that are true but cannot be proven. Think about that. Truths that can never be known, hidden realities. Gödel wrapped the liar's logic in symbols and equations and turned it into a weapon. And with it, he cracked open the fortress of certainty. We think of math as pure, clean, flawless, but Gödel showed it has shadows, places where truth hides. And isn't that what the grandfather paradox is too? A truth that hides from itself. You exist because you didn't kill your grandfather, but you only didn't because you tried. And the liar's paradox? It is false because it's true, because it's false. Each paradox, a mirror that reflects itself. Now, let's wander somewhere unexpected. Have you heard of bootstrap paradoxes? They're like the grandfather paradox's quieter cousin. Imagine you travel back in time and hand Shakespeare a copy of Hamlet. He reads it, loves it, and copies it word for word. Later, the play becomes famous. Centuries pass. You grow up. And one day, find Hamlet in a bookstore. Inspired, you go back in time and give it to Shakespeare. But here's the puzzle. Who actually wrote Hamlet? Not you. You got it from the future. Not Shakespeare. He copied it from you. The idea came from nowhere. That's the bootstrap paradox. Something from nothing. An object or idea that exists without ever being created. Causality folded in half. What if your memories work like that? What if some of your thoughts came from a version of you haven't become yet? What if déjà vu is a message from the loop? Paradoxes like this force us to ask questions we can't answer. And that's the point. They aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be felt, like poetry, like dreams. Like standing at the edge of a cliff and wondering what's on the other side of the fog. So where does this leave us? In a universe filled with uncertainty, where time might fold, where truth might loop, where logic might shatter under its own weight. And yet, we keep asking. We keep building time machines. In our books, our films, our theories. We keep writing paradoxes on napkins, testing the limits of words and meaning. We keep dreaming of what lies beyond the knowable. And maybe that's the paradox of being human, that we search for truth, even when we know it may never be found. So next time someone says, "I always lie," or, "If I could go back, I'd change everything," smile, because behind those words lies a universe of questions. And maybe, just maybe, the answers don't matter as much as the wonder they leave behind. Because paradoxes aren't dead ends. They're invitations to think, to doubt, to dream. And like time itself, the story they tell never really ends. Now let's wander somewhere unexpected. Have you heard of the Ship of Theseus? It's an ancient thought experiment, but one that's startlingly modern. Imagine a ship, built long ago, that sails proudly across the sea. Waves crash, winds wear it down, time takes its toll. So the sailors replace a plank, then another, then the mast, then the sails, until, over years, every part of the ship has been replaced. Not a single piece remains from the original. Yet it still sails, still carries the same name, Theseus. So we ask, is it still the same ship? Now imagine, someone gathers all those discarded pieces, the old wood, the original ropes, the weathered wheel, and rebuilds the ship. Now, there are two ships, one built from continuity, one built from the original materials. Which one is the real Ship of Theseus? What defines identity? Is it history, material, or memory? Now ask yourself, are you the same person you were 10 years ago? Every cell in your body has changed, your thoughts have evolved, you've forgotten things, you've learned others. Are you still you? Or are you simply the story you tell yourself about who you used to be? Now, meet the barber. He lives in a peculiar village. This barber has one very specific rule. He shaves all the men in town who do not shave themselves, and only those men. So here's the twist. Does the barber shave himself? If he does, then by rule he shouldn't. If he doesn't, then by rule he must. It's a simple setup, and it leads to a contradiction. This is the Barber Paradox. It sounds like a joke, but it's not. It's a window into the limits of self-reference. Rules that refer to themselves can collapse. And this idea shook the very foundation of mathematics. Enter Russell's paradox. Imagine the set of all sets that do not contain themselves. Sounds abstract? Let's break it down. A set is just a collection. Some sets contain other sets. Some contain themselves. But now, think of a set that contains only those sets that do not contain themselves. The question, does this set contain itself? If it does, it shouldn't. If it doesn't, it should. Just like the barber, just like the liar. This paradox, proposed by Bertrand Russell, nearly broke the foundations of logic. It exposed flaws in how we understood math itself. Entire systems had to be rebuilt. Because a simple question, does this contain itself, was enough to shake the structure of logic. That's the power of a paradox. It can take something invisible and make it unavoidable. Now step into ancient Greece. A philosopher named Zeno gave us a thought experiment. Actually, he gave us several. But let's begin with the simplest. A runner wants to reach the finish line, but first he must get halfway there, then halfway of what's left, then halfway again, and again. An infinite number of steps. So how can he ever arrive? It seems like motion should be impossible. We know he does reach the finish line. We see it happen. But the logic says he never truly gets there, because there's always more halfway to go. That's Zeno's paradox, a puzzle about infinity in a world of limits. The mind stumbles. The math says he can, but the logic whispers he never truly arrives. It doesn't mean the world is broken. It means our logic might be too small to hold it. Here's a mind bender that bends power itself. Can an all-powerful being create a rock so heavy that it cannot lift it? If it can't, then it's not all-powerful. If it can but then can lift it, still not all-powerful. Either way, power limits itself. This is the Omnipotence Paradox. It's not really about rocks. It's about the edges of perfection. If something is infinite, can it have a boundary? And if it has no boundaries, can it ever be fully understood? Let's bring it back down to earth. We live in a world of choices. Endless choices. Pick a career, a coffee, a movie, a soulmate, a belief. You'd think more options make us more free, but strangely, they often make us more miserable. This is the paradox of choice. Studies show more options lead to more regret, more anxiety, more fear of making the wrong decision. We crave freedom, but we're overwhelmed by it. So we simplify, we build routines, we limit ourselves, just to feel sane again. The paradox? Too much freedom feels like a trap. Now here's one that feels like a riddle and a warning. A judge tells a prisoner, "You will be hanged next week, on a day you do not expect." The prisoner thinks it through. If I'm alive by Thursday night, it must be Friday, so I'll expect it. He eliminates Friday, then Thursday, then Wednesday. Eventually, he concludes, it can't happen. But on Wednesday morning, the executioner arrives, and he's shocked. This is the unexpected hanging paradox. Logic said he was safe. Reality had other plans. It's a story about self-reference, expectation, and the limits of prediction. Sometimes, what we know gets in the way of what is. And finally, one that lives quietly inside society, the paradox of tolerance. A society that values freedom must tolerate all views, even unpopular ones, even uncomfortable ones. But if it tolerates the intolerant, those who wish to silence or dominate, then freedom itself is at risk. So to preserve tolerance, we may need to be intolerant of intolerance. But doesn't that make us intolerant? It's a moral loop, a political loop, a human loop, and it reminds us that principles can collide, that ideals sometimes contradict themselves. Let's step even further into the strange, the raven paradox. Suppose you want to test the hypothesis that all ravens are black. You see a black raven, that supports your theory. But now imagine you see a green apple. It's not a raven, and it's not black. Yet technically, it supports the theory, because it confirms that a non-raven can be non-black. The logic works, but the intuition collapses. A green apple proves that all ravens are black? Absurd. And yet, it fits the rule. That's the raven paradox, a challenge to how we reason, and how we trust evidence. Now let's visit the Abilene paradox. A family sits at home on a hot day. Someone suggests they drive to Abilene for lunch. No one really wants to go, but everyone agrees, thinking the others want it. They drive. They eat. They're miserable. On the way back, they realize no one actually wanted to go. Everyone was acting for the sake of everyone else. This is a paradox of group dynamics, where individuals act against their own desires because they believe it aligns with the group. The result? Collective unhappiness and silent conformity. Now, consider the twin paradox from relativity. Imagine twins. One stays on Earth, the other travels near the speed of light in a spaceship. Years pass. When the traveler returns, they are younger than the twin who stayed. Time has passed differently. Both saw themselves as stationary. Both saw the other as moving. Yet one has aged, one hasn't. The twin paradox isn't fiction, it's physics. Einstein showed that time is not absolute. It bends, it stretches, it loops, and our experience of it is deeply relative. Think of it like this. Your clock isn't just ticking, it's traveling through a flexible universe. And your perception is only part of the truth. Now here's one from probability. The Monty Hall problem. You're on a game show. There are 3 doors. Behind one is a car. Behind the other 2, goats. You pick one. The host, who knows what's behind each door, opens one of the others, revealing a goat. He asks, do you want to switch? Intuition says it doesn't matter, but probability says you should always switch. Your odds jump from 1 in 3 to 2 in 3. It defies instinct, but it's mathematically sound. A paradox not of logic, but of how our brains misread risk, how our gut can lie. Let's return to something older, the Sorites paradox. If you have a heap of sand and remove a single grain, is it still a heap? Remove another, still a heap. At what point does a heap stop being a heap? No single grain makes the difference, and yet, at some point, it's clearly not a heap anymore. This paradox questions vague concepts. Where does tall become short? Where does young become old? When does life become life? Language fails us. Categories blur. The boundaries we trust melt, and we're left holding ambiguity in our hands. Which brings us back to the heart of paradoxes. They are not puzzles to solve. They are mirrors to gaze into. They reflect the edges of logic, the gaps in language, the spaces between what we feel and what we know. They remind us that truth is sometimes stranger than imagination, and that understanding doesn't always arrive wrapped in clarity. Sometimes it arrives in riddles, in loops, in contradictions that refuse to resolve. But in those contradictions is where we grow, where we doubt, where we begin to see not what is, but what might be. So next time you feel the world doesn't make sense, remember, it might not be broken, it might just be paradoxical. And in that paradox, there is beauty. And if this journey through paradoxes made you think, even for a moment, if it stirred a question, a smile, or a spark of curiosity, then you're already part of the story. So, if you'd like to keep exploring strange ideas, impossible thoughts, and the edges of reality, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the notifications. Not because the algorithm says so, but because curiosity deserves a place to grow. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and remember, the most fascinating answers often begin with a paradox.